and thank you for attending the Urban League of Portland's Meet the Candidates Forum for Portland City Council District 2. My name is Michael Alexander, and I am the former past president and chief executive officer of the Urban League of Portland. I will be tonight's moderator. Before we get started, I want to thank our community partners for supporting tonight's forum. Tonight, we will feature candidates running for City Council District 2. With us are Mariah Hudson, Mike Marshall, Chris Olson, Tiffany Panson, Ilana Petro-Guinea, Dan Ryan, Sam Sachs, and Nate West. I'd like to share the Urban League of Portland's candidate selection process. The upcoming changes in Portland's government created unique challenges in planning this year's forums. Difficult choices had to be made, but the Urban League is committed to impartiality and stuck to an objective criteria for inclusion. In short, we examine candidates' performance in small donor matching funds, prior political history, and the number of labor unions and other community-based organizations and politicians who had endorsed their campaign. The Urban League of Portland regrets that it could not include all of those running, but our hope is that you will be able to use these forums as a tool to make empowered and informed decisions with your ballot. For tonight's event, there will be an opening statement, questions, and a closing statement. Although we hope the forum will be an exciting and informative event, we also want it to be an orderly and respectful one. All defamatory, abusive, profane, threatening, offensive, or hate speech are strictly prohibited. Candidates that engage in this behavior will be removed from the forum. Here are 5 ground rules for our candidates. 1, please remain muted if you're not answering a question. We ask you to do this for audio issues as well as for video focus. And please don't lose sight of this request. Number 2, the candidates will have 1 minute for their opening statement. I will ask each of you directly to deliver your opening statement. Number 3, when questions are asked, the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. We will ask 4 questions, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Number 4, after the questions are complete, the candidates will have 1 minute to deliver a closing statement. And again, I will specifically ask you to deliver your closing statement. And finally, number 5, please be courteous and conscientious of time. Throughout the forum, when speaking, if you are within 30 seconds of your allotted time, our staff will send you a private notification. If you go over time, we will send a chat to all to let you know that your time is up. And if you persist in going over time, you will be muted. All right, let's start. We'd like to begin with opening statements in alphabetical order. And so when called upon, you will have 1 minute to introduce yourself. Let us begin with Mariah Hudson. Mariah, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm Mariah Hudson. I'm a working parent and a leader at OHSU. I'm the former chair of the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods, where I've worked with Northeast neighbors to solve problems with the city for years. I've served our communities for more than a decade, solving problems, everything from potholes to public safety. I also chair 2 budget committees for Portland Public Schools and for the Portland Bureau of Transportation, because I want Portland to be a city that serves us all and serves us all well. I'm stepping up now because I bring the skills of serving our city that we love in a crisis. Through COVID at OHSU, The city we love is safe and affordable and sustainable. We've lost some of that, and I want to help bring us back. So I'm stepping forward to bring my skills and the urgency we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariah. Mike Marshall, you have 1 minute.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And thanks to the Urban League for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here tonight. And thanks to all my running mates who are here as well and everyone watching. I'm live with my husband at 21st and Siskiyou. I'm a person in long-term recovery from addiction. And that's really one of the driving reasons I'm running for city council, because I think our city's addiction crisis is leading to so many of the other issues that we are trying to resolve. And I'm also the co-founder and executive director of Oregon Recovers, a statewide advocacy campaign comprised of people in recovery and their friends and family fighting to end Oregon's addiction crisis. And so I know what it takes. As a person in long-term recovery from meth and alcohol, I know what it takes to help move people off the streets and into recovery. But I also am running because I love that we're reinventing our democracy. And I want to be a part of making our city government much more accountable to the voters and
Thank you, Mike. All right. And now let's move on. Chris Olson, you have 1 minute.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Chris Olson, and I'm running to represent the needs of this community and not corporations. Like many people, I'm really frustrated with how our city government ignores the needs of everyday Portlanders. And I believe it's time that we have empathetic and responsive representatives on our city council. A little bit about me, just to make things quick. I've worked in the nonprofit sector for over a decade in community organizing and communications. 4.5 of those years were in the city of Chicago, working to solve the problems there for people of all different backgrounds. I'm also the youngest candidate running in this district. I'm a renter, and I feel like I can represent the people in this district who might feel like they're being left out and left behind in this economy, and might be concerned about things like the climate crisis and the affordability issues that we're facing.
Thank you, Chris. Tiffany Penson, you have 1 minute.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Penson. I'm born, raised, and rooted in Northeast Portland, and I actually live in my family home in the Concordia area. My father had a barbershop on Union Avenue, what is now MLK, where people came and gathered, shared stories, waiting for the perfect haircut. My parents instilled in me both a commitment to community and a sense of urgency to get things done. I have plans to make Portland safe and livable, to house our neighbors, to strengthen our economy and ensure a skilled workforce, and to craft a city budget that is accessible and accountable. I'm focused on forging stronger, more inclusive communities, which I do as elected Portland Community College board director and in my role as city and people at the city as people and culture manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Ilana
Thank
Pertol Guinea. I want to make sure I get it correct. You have
it. Ilana Pertol Guinea. Thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Ilana. I'm running for city council because I believe in Portland's future. I believe that we can be a city that represents the needs of all of our people, that we can be a city that works for everybody who lives here, that brings people up instead of pushing them out of our city. I started my career in advocacy. I worked with labor unions and teaching working people how to advocate for change in their communities and doing a lot of work with other nonprofits in Portland, building coalitions to work on issues of economic justice. Then I went to the governor's office and worked on policy, built public budgets, and at the end of my time there was Governor Brown's legislative director. I've brought community together. I have worked to pass bills and budgets. I've worked to make sure that those are things that can actually be implemented to bring real results, to help make change for our state. And I want to bring those skills to our city. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope to earn folks' support tonight.
Thank you, Ilana. Dan Ryan, you have 1 minute.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Dan Ryan. I was born and raised in District 2, a graduate of Roosevelt High School. I came back in 1995 to my hometown to be of service. And speaking of service, I jumped in and ran in 2020, was elected in September of that year. And I think we all know it's been one of our most challenging 4 years of being in service to this beautiful city of ours. Because I've been on city council, I took I had to make tough decisions and leadership, and I was able to be the deciding vote to stop the defunding of police. I also dug in and brought all 8 bureaus together to get the permit reforms up and running and got people in the budget to actually see that through. And I'm also the person that dared to get these Safe Rest Villages built in spite of opposition. And now it's definitely one of the programs that's saving people's lives, giving people a chance to actually be whole again and getting back into the workforce. And that's the Portland story we all want. So I want to see some of this through. Thought it'd be great to have someone with a little bit of experience on the city council. And I look forward to tonight's discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Sam Sachs, you have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Sam Sachs. My family came here to Portland in the 1940s, Jewish immigrants. I was born here, raised in Albany. After that, I went in the Army, played college football, and then I came back to Portland after finding my younger brother. I've been in law enforcement and public safety for 30 years. I have a degree from Portland State University in Black Studies with a focus in African American. I served as a human rights commissioner for the city of Portland. I founded the No Hate Zone, a nonprofit focused on ending hate and racism in the community through education, community engagement, and advocacy. I helped unionize the city of Portland Park Rangers, and I've passed policy around racial inclusion in the city, county, and state. And I think all of those things, my experience, my education, my love for the city, are certainly tools that qualify me to serve this community. And I would love the opportunity, and I hope that you will consider me when you decide who to vote for District 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Nat West, you have 1 minute.
Thank you for having me here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Alexander, for moderating this forum. I've lived in Woodlawn for 20 years in this house. I started Reverend Nat's Hard Cider in this house 12 years ago and grew it to be a fairly large small business. We had 2 cideries in the Elliott neighborhood over the course of 12 years. And I shipped more than 7 million bottles and cans around the world that each one stated made in the historic city of Albina. So I've always loved the communities in District 2, and particularly Albina. I've also loved donating to community groups at Reverend Nat's Hard Cider. The first donation I made was to Woodlawn Elementary PTA. I've made custom ciders and given away all of the proceeds to Albina Vision Trust, and was a regular sponsor of the Good in the Hood Festival at King School. 95% of Black-owned businesses in the United States are sole proprietors versus about 5% of white-owned businesses. So I'm running to.
Thank you, Nat. We appreciate it. All right, and now we're going to begin the question portion of our forum. And for each question, we will ask for candidate responses in a predetermined random order. So please pay attention to the question. When you're called upon, you will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Question 1. In the last 4 years, there has been more than 200 traffic fatalities across Portland, impacting both pedestrians and other drivers. Research shows that drivers in Portland are less likely to safely yield to Black pedestrians. Additionally, a Vision Zero report this year found out that Black communities in Portland experience traffic violence at a disproportionate rate. Given these troubled findings, how will you prioritize safety on roads? Sam Sachs, we will begin with you, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
How will I prioritize traffic safety? Well, my goal, if elected, is to prioritize diversity and equity in everything that I do, and really the work that I've been doing for the last 30 years. And so I appreciate those statistics. I was unfamiliar with how alarming they are. But I think there's some good things that are in place right now with the infrastructure and lane changes um, and some of the bike paths, things like that are taking place. But I think that we need to do a better job. During the last 4 years, the police traffic unit was disbanded and was not out there doing their job. So I'm not saying that we need to rely on law enforcement, but I think that is a big part of trying to lower the numbers. I think education and engagement with communities of color, the BIPOC community, and explaining and understanding the difficulties and the dangers of traffic out there. So I think it'll be I know it'll be a priority for me, working with community organizations, with law enforcement and other organizations to educate on, some enforcement. And if we have to change the flow of traffic to save lives, then that's something I think we need to look at as well and continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Ilana, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So we need our streets to be safe for all users. That includes pedestrians, that includes folks on bikes, and it means we need to make sure we have safe streets for our drivers as well. We need to be filling in potholes and doing the things that make sure that cars aren't swerving to avoid dangers in the road. We have done some good things to help increase safety. There are a number of streets in my neighborhood. I live in the Vernon neighborhood, where speed limits have been dropped recently. And I see folks paying more attention when they see the speed going down and when they see those cameras that are recording your speeds. We need to keep doing that and do some of the hardening that makes it easier for pedestrians to cross streets, including places where cars have to stop with the flashing lights for pedestrians, because those flashing lights they don't care whether you're black or brown or white. They flash and you cross the street, right? We also, though, need to do some education. And we need to work with Portlanders to make sure that people understand, as we slow down traffic on streets and neighborhoods, where folks should be driving. As we build more infrastructure for pedestrians to cross safely, where should folks be crossing the street? And I think it's really important to make sure that there's that communication 2 ways, from the city to community, so that folks are taking advantage of the infrastructure we're putting in, and also from community to the city, so that if there are major problem areas, we're hearing about that. And one of the things that I think we can do a little more effectively with this new system is make sure that we're taking that input from our community members and flagging hotspots, flagging places that might not be popping on what PBOT is looking at, but where neighbors know there are safety issues, and making sure we're elevating those to PBOT in a different way. It looks like I've got to wrap up now, so I'll stop there.
Ilana, thank you very much. Mike Marshall, you have 2 minutes.
Great, Michael. Thank you for that question. So I'm probably the only candidate who has a history of taking on the alcohol industry. And I'm guessing, Michael, that statistic you shared, which is brand new to me and really alarming, relative to 200 fatalities a year, and that drivers are much less likely to brake for African Americans than for other folks. But I think over half of those fatalities involve alcohol, either the driver or the person who was hit. And I think we need to look at alcohol density when looking at traffic fatalities and pedestrian safety. And we know that there are more liquor licenses issued to communities of color and low-income communities than there are to high income communities. And so we really need to look at that. The other issue I would say, though, is that we have to have the resources to address this issue. We need, obviously, that statistic, which, again, is about not stopping for African American folks, or yielding to African American folks. We need to educate people about that fact. We need to provoke people like me who didn't know about that or think about it or look like me to think about it. And part of that is resources. And I've taken some heat because I'm the one advocating that we convert the gas tax to from a set a flat fee to a percentage of sales tax, so that the revenue from the gas tax increases, so that we can deal with the deferred maintenance, the $1 billion in deferred maintenance from our roads, but also have the ability to do more public education about traffic fatalities, about driving through neighborhoods, and all of those things. And we can't solve these problems if we don't have the resources to do it. And I think.
Mike, thank you very much. We're going to move on. Chris Olson, you have 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. This is obviously an incredibly sad statistic that I was quite familiar with just the amount of fatalities that we have on our roads here in Portland, which is completely unacceptable. Obviously, like many injustices that face it, actually, it disproportionately affects our Black communities and communities of color. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure Portland is safe for everyone. So there are two things that I would do if I was elected to city council and push to make sure that our roads are much safer here in Portland. The first one is build a network of urban trails that crisscross the city that are protected pedestrian and bike pathways. We want to make sure that everyone in all of our neighborhoods, people can get safely to where they're going to go by foot or by bike. And we want to make sure that it's in a place that is off of the main thoroughfares, in a secure location, that it's well lit, and that there's plenty of trees and it's there's plenty of shade. And there's actually already a plan for this. So if you want to go to bikeportland.com, you can check this out and look up an urban trail network. And I would work with those developers to see if we can put this plan into place as soon as we can. Next thing I want to do is I just want to fight for fareless transit. We can use the power of our city in Salem to make TriMet free for everyone across the metro area. Fareless transit is going to make our roads safer because we're going to get more cars off the streets, and we'll be able to make sure that everyday Portlanders, no matter where they come from, are able to get to where they go, because I believe transit is a human right, and we actually need to make sure that our city is providing the resources that people need to get to where they go.
Thank you, Chris. Nat West, you have 2 minutes. Nat, you are on mute. Okay, you're off.
Thank you. So the question is, how will we prioritize safety on roads? In 2023, we had a 30-year high of traffic deaths. With any luck, we won't break that record this year. Other regions are not suffering the same level of traffic deaths that we are in Portland. So there are solutions. We can fix this. I was hit on my bike recently in the same stretch of road twice this year. So that's clearly an indication of bad infrastructure on that road. There's a huge inequality of infrastructure that's implemented in the city. For instance, Williams Avenue was too fast for many years. And then along came primarily white bicyclists, myself included. We show up and start using that street a lot, and it gets redesigned in 2014. Is it perfect? No. Williams Ave at Dawson Park, another small example. I used to be a TriMet bus driver, and I drove the Route 4 there. I drove the Route 24 there. That area is always going to be busy. There's 2 churches, there's a corner store, the hospital, the park. It's close to Matt Dishman. There's 3 TriMet lines through there. Knowing that drivers are less likely to slow down for Black people, and that stretch of Williams needs a lot of work, which needs to be intensely coordinated with people who have historically used that area. And it shouldn't just be done by engineers downtown. Finally, I think there's a question of sort of bad behavior. Leadership needs to call out bad driving behavior. I have a good driving record. I was able to get hired by TriMet as a bus driver. We need to call out people who are flaunting our laws, and based on who is running for mayor, we may end up with some elected officials who clearly think that the rules of the road don't apply to them, and others who feel the impact of those bad behaviors.
Nat, thank you very much. Mariah Hudson, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, so I am actually quite familiar with this statistic. I'm the chair of the Portland Bureau of Transportation's Budget Committee, or was for a couple of years, and review the Vision Zero metrics every year. Unfortunately, those haven't been going down as fast as we would like them. Even though there's been a lot of money put into those projects. And what I would like to point out is that we need to better direct the money that we are putting into our system so that we are addressing the points where folks are really at risk, particularly our Black communities, and particularly our young people, and particularly our older people who are the ones who are crossing streets. I'm a cyclist, I'm a runner, I have young children, we're crossing streets, but it's, it's streets out in the numbers, it's streets where, like Division, where we have a lot of people crossing. We know those high crash corridors where those are most fatal. And that's where we need to concentrate our resources. I also believe our safe routes to school is an area where we need to concentrate and focus our resources. That's where we're going to reduce our traffic deaths. But the other thing I want to point out is that a lot of those traffic deaths or near fatal incidents are happening at dusk and dawn. We can focus on our lighting, and we know that they're also happening oftentimes in our houseless populations, people who are nearest traffic and who are coming into traffic in close contact with traffic because they're simply there. So helping people off the streets, helping people into housing, having the job so that people don't arrive there in the first place is going to improve our situation, particularly, looking at our Black and Native communities. That's how I'll address our traffic problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. Dan Ryan, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I really like this thought-provoking question. I'm well aware of the data on the traffic, the incidents of pedestrian deaths, but it doesn't get brought up that the target and how the impact and disproportionality impacts African-American Black population in our city. And I'm going to go on some hunches. I'd like to drill into the data more. And next time this comes from Vision Zero and from PBOT, we should probably have someone from Urban League be on the panel. East Portland has a higher percentage of African-American residents. That's also where we have more incidents. It's because, of course, a lot of us know this, the infrastructure that's lacking out there with sidewalks and lighting. I also think that there's some good news. When 82nd used to be under state control, it's now under city control. So we have a trend. So we're taking over some of the state byways, and they're becoming city controlled. So we can't blame it on the state any longer. And that's important. And I think the safe route to schools is great, but I think we also need to partner more with the schools in the building. I know it's been a while since I was in elementary school, but you had a lot of training about what it means to be safe when you're a pedestrian. And I think getting back to, that was when everyone had to walk to school, basically. So I think it's really great that kids are riding bikes and walking to school more. And with that can come more curriculum and education about it, and just make it a part of the vibe. Dan, please wrap up. Okay, I don't want to be silenced. This is a great conversation. Look forward to more of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Tiffany Penson, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for the question. So I'm very aware of the statistics, and I also have lived experience where cars do not necessarily stop. My first home that I purchased was on Beach in between Williams, and then the next street was Union Avenue. And I can't count actually as many times as I've watched where I've waited or stepped off the curb and cars still come. I also worked for Mayor Adams, who started really the focus and build out of multimodal good transportation. One of the things that I learned during the experience of Williams Avenue, one of the issues were when you looked around the room wasn't diverse. The impacts that happened on Williams Avenue, it wasn't a lot of people that looked like me sitting at the table making the decisions around that we're gonna decide to finally slow down Williams Avenue. My mother was raised over that way, and for years, Black community asked to slow Williams Avenue down because it was a fast-moving street. And then all of a sudden, there were 3,000 bikers coming up, and all of a sudden, people decide, oh, we must slow it down. And we were part of that conversation, of course, because it happened under Mayor Adams. But one of the things that I noticed in that, the conversation wasn't started from.
Thank you, Tiffany. All right, we're going to move on to question 2. And again, the order has been determined on a random basis, so please pay attention to the question. The city auditor recently found that Portland's inclusionary housing program has not increased housing access for Portland's worst off. This problem particularly impacts Black renters and families who face higher barriers to quality, affordable housing. How will you advocate for increased production and accessibility of housing? Dan Ryan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, first, I would start off by saying that we have to continue to promote and invest in the programs that are working for African-American communities, such as the Northeast Project. The fact is that is getting at home ownership as well. And in order to really build generational wealth, it's really important to continue to stay focused on that. There's a lot of heat on this program because it's a big, audacious goal. And I think that those of us that are on the next city council have to protect and preserve that. I also think it's important that we recognize that it's about workforce as well. And I want to just comment that I've been a strong advocate for not just COPID minority and women-owned contractors, but workforce population within that, the demographics of the workforce. So basically what I'm getting at is it's so important to not give up on the dream of having more African Americans be a part of that housing equity market. The exclusionary housing policies have been, I think, overbaked and underwhelmed in terms of results in general. I was the leader of the Housing Bureau that wanted to recast that. We were definitely falling down on family housing, which is very important to the community. And we were allowing people to get by with skirting those requirements. And I've always been upset about that. So I will always promote for more family housing as we look into editing exclusionary housing. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Tiffany Penson, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to keep it within the 2. So one of the things, inclusionary housing, one of the things that we need, especially when we think about Black people and people of color, I want to see more opportunities to own houses, to purchase houses. So pouring and investing in organizations that have first-time buyers programs and things like that. Also, more multifamily. We need more multifamily. A lot of people of color, and this is generalization, but they have bigger families. And so just having access to 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom doesn't work for us. I think that we can do better with making sure that inclusionary housing really is an inclusion of all people, but we have to think about workforce. We have to think about providing access to loans and things so people can really take advantage of those opportunities. We need all forms of housing, just not apartments and things. We actually need things that people can own and buy at the same time. So I think there's some room there to do some work.
Thank you, Tiffany. Chris Olson, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, housing is one of my top priorities, and it's been one of my top priorities on my plan because we are in an unprecedented housing crisis in the city of Portland for a multitude of reasons. But to answer this question and to address some of the issues, I think when it comes to housing production, obviously I believe more production would help. decrease costs and make sure that people have more access to affordable homes. I definitely want to see us being able to cut some red tape for developers so they'd be able to build more multi-unit buildings across the city, including particularly in the Inner East Side. I would support rezoning parts of the Inner East Side to allow for more multi-unit buildings to go up. The other thing for me too is just really a pressing issue is the cost of rent in the city. Rent has gone up over 50% in the last 4 years for many people. And I know that wages haven't kept pace with that. A lot of people are working 2 or 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. And so we need to deal with the crisis that people are facing right now. And so that's why I've been the day one signer of the Renters Bill of Rights. And I want to make sure I pass that, be one of my top priorities if I was elected to Portland City Council, to make sure that we keep rent increases at no more than 5% annually and cap things like late fees and pet rent, because we can talk about housing affordability and owning your own home, but a lot of people are just struggling to just make it month to month. And so we need to address the issues that people are facing at hand right now. And then I'm more than happy to also support programs to get people into their home, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time and help people right now and for building wealth down the line.
Thank you, Chris. Nat West, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So the question is, how will we advocate for increased production and accessibility of housing? I think more housing of all kinds helps all people, including Black renters and homeowners. I'll work to speed up design reviews so that new housing projects know when the project will be approved, when the permit will be in hand. I'll keep work on improving the permitting bureau that Commissioner Ryan kicked off and worked on. There's never-ending work to make sure the permitting bureau is working well. And as Chris Olson just mentioned, push for denser zoning, taller buildings along transit corridors. I want to give a shout out to Michelle DePass, who worked pretty heavily on the North-Northeast preference policy. I talked to her earlier today and she couldn't make it because she has a school board meeting today. I'll work to strengthen that preference policy as much as is legally allowed to make it easier to get on the list and also make it faster to get off the list. Folks like POIC, groups like POIC have a hard time using the list sometimes. I talked to some staff there recently and they have some suggestions about how to tweak the use of that list. I also want to acknowledge that there was a massive removal of generational wealth particularly in District 2. And it's pretty, I think, insulting to shift people who did own their homes into a perpetual landlord-tenant situation with affordable rents as opposed to affordable home ownership. So I look for more grants, working with more groups such as Urban League and POIC and SEI. I think it's really important that we have we're transparent about the funding that's coming in and going out, where are those grants going to, which groups are they going to, and then which individuals are they going to. And then finally, I recently heard from Representative Mark Gamba that he's working on a proposal in the state to build large numbers of homes at under $300,000 sale price. So that's something that I'll keep my eyes on and do our part to make sure that it passes.
Thank you, Nat. Ilana Petrol-Guinea, did I get it close?
That was close. You're great.
Oh, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. And, there's a lot of good things have been said. I think it's really important that we focus on not only affordable rentals, but also affordable home ownership. Affordable home ownership allows people to leave the rental market and then puts less pressure on our rentals so that we can really catch up for the need there as well. It also, to the point that Nat made, makes sure that we're addressing the taking of generational wealth that had accumulated. I am a big fan of the North and Northeast neighborhood housing strategy. Dan said that we need to make sure we continue to invest in that, and that's something that's been on my list from the beginning of this campaign as an important program at the city that frankly needs its budget increased significantly for us to be able to meet the needs of the community and to meet the needs of North and Northeast Portland. We also need to look at land banking and land trusts to make sure that we have permanently affordable homeownership opportunities, not just a home that is sold at a discounted rate, but homes that maintain affordability for the next family and the family after that. And those homes that can be starter homes for folks who are struggling to scrape up the significant amount that's needed to put a down payment down and start the journey of homeownership. The city has the opportunity to invest in land when prices are a little bit lower and partner with land trusts through land banking to bring that in. On the inclusionary zoning side specifically, though, we know that that's a program that works in some cities, and I want to make sure that we're digging in before we give up on that completely to figure out why it works in some cities and hasn't been working in Portland, because affordable rentals are an important part of the spectrum of home opportunities for people as well.
Thank you, Ilana. Sam Sachs, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. I just want to, agree with a lot of things that have already been touched on, so I don't want to take my 2 minutes to go over those things. But I do want to say that this is why I'm running for city council. One of my frustrations, in reading this question, why are we still having these issues, and why are the problem particularly impacts Black renters and families? My goal when elected is to make North and Northeast Portland a destination spot for Black and BIPOC communities, to bring people back home to where they used to live. This city has a history of displacing Black and brown communities for decades. And I think it's something we need to prioritize. The question is, how will you advocate? It'll be a priority for me to bring Black and brown people back to North and Northeast Portland, to get them into homes, to get them into home ownerships, whatever that looks like. Why are the barriers? What are the barriers? And I think that's something we have to look at, and we have to study and understand what are the barriers and how do we get through those. We have to make it a priority. One of the things I think we need to revisit, if that somehow plays into home ownership and renting, land ownership, is reparations. It's been discussed in the city before, but that's why I'm running. My frustration that this city has not fulfilled its promise to the Black community and to the BIPOC community, and we're still dealing with these issues of insufficiency when it comes to home ownership, when it comes to living and renting in North and Northeast Portland. We need to make it a priority, and that's what I will do, is to make it a priority to fulfill those promises and to make it possible for Black and brown people to own homes, land, and be a part of that community, not just in North and Northeast Portland, but all over the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Mike Marshall, you have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. I don't think there's anything that's been said that I don't agree with. I want to start off by pointing out that the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris, is campaigning on a commitment to provide down payments for folks to get into the housing market. And I think as a city, and a city council, we need to support that effort as much as possible and really push our congressional delegation to make that happen. The fact is that we know we're supposed to be building 5,200 housing units a year here in Portland for the next 20 years to get to where we need to be. And this year we're only going to build 500. So we're already falling behind. And so we have to look at every level of housing, as I think someone suggested. And one of the big challenges is our permitting process. Yes, Dan and Carmen have done a great job of consolidating that, hopefully, but we still have to wait and see how well that's working, because the biggest challenge to building middle income housing or working family housing is for the developers, the uncertainty of the time delays related to the permitting. And if they just had certainty built in, then it pencils out more. But also we're not going to build our way out of this. And so we have to look at other alternatives too. Home sharing is something we should be incentivizing tomorrow, so that older Oregonians like me or older Portlanders like me, as we get older, can be incentivized to open our house and to provide housing to other folks. The other issue I would say is that we have to look at income in this city. And Chris, pointed out that we should have free transportation for everyone. That will add $6,000 per family that uses public transportation versus $10,000 a year to families that have cars. And so if we create a free public transportation system, automatically families are going to have more money to work with. And secondly,
Mike, we're at time. Thank you. Mariah, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah. When I look at District 2, the opportunity here and the huge challenge, especially when I look at 5 and 10 years, it's affordability of housing, especially for our Black community. Lloyd, Albina Vision, these are our opportunities, and they're also where jobs are going to be. As we're capping our freeways, as we're building out the Columbia Crossing, these are going to be higher wage jobs with union jobs, hopefully in construction, close to the city, and we need the housing built there. So enabling that, through things we've had mentioned here, multifamily housing, continuing the permitting reform, but the things I think we can do right now around inclusionary zoning. We've tried that with new housing, but I would like to see that done with existing housing. Giving the opportunity for landlords to opt into that, get some tax incentive, opt their buildings into it, and create some permanent affordable housing. We know that there are buildings that are under market right now, that the markets come down, the cost of those units has come down, and that would create opportunities right here in our communities that we could look at. I would also like to look at, we have a quick build ADU program that the city of Portland has wisely adopted from cities like Eugene and Bend that are creating infill opportunities. I'd like to consider and perhaps pilot, creating that as a single family unit opportunities. We need to do housing on all fronts. So these are some of the 85 strategies that we've recently, have been published in the housing strategies. We need to go hard on all fronts, but to create that stability that we need, including home ownership, to reestablish, to bring in our Black communities as there's going to be housing built, as there are going to be jobs, to make sure that we have the diverse, thriving community that I want Portland to be in the future.
Thank you, Mariah. All right, we are moving on to question 3. And again, the order of selection is a random one. If elected to City Council, you will take office on the same day as a new voter-approved Police Oversight Board. State data shows that Portland Police Bureau stops on Black residents have increased by 17%, while stops on white counterparts have decreased by 4%. How will you work with that board to ensure disparities in policing in Portland are monitored, corrected, and prevented? And we will begin with Chris.
Yes, thanks so much for the question, Michael. My answer to this question is pretty simple. On my agenda, since I've announced it, I have recommended the City Council adopts the full recommendations of the Police Accountability Commission, which this current City Council gutted back in November. It's completely undermining the will of the voters of Portland who passed this previous measure with over 80% of the vote. So we need to go back and take a look at that as City Council, make sure that our police oversight board is actually doing the job of independently overseeing our police department here. These numbers and statistics are unacceptable. Things have not gotten better in the city, and our police need to be held accountable. And if elected Portland City Council, that's what I'll do, and make sure that the PPB and the PPA know that they serve the people of Portland and not the other way around.
Thank you, Chris. Nat, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So how will I work to ensure disparities in policing are monitored, corrected, and prevented? There are a lot of ways that disparities in policing occur. One way that I'll work is to focus on traffic stops. So driving while Black is a legitimate thing. We can look at Rodney King, Dante Wright, Tyree Nichols, even recently Tyreek Hill. We can see that traffic stops oftentimes escalate quickly when you're a Black driver, no matter your behavior. We clearly need greater enforcement. We just talked about the being how unsafe it is to cross the street as a Black person in Portland. So we need greater enforcement. But if we look at some other cities, for instance, I recently looked at Oslo, Norway, the capital of Norway, and obviously there's a huge amount of differences between us, but we have about the same population as Oslo, and Oslo has about 1/10 the number of annual traffic deaths as Portland. One way that I think we should work on this while keeping an eye on racial disparities is to pivot to cameras enforcement. There was a recent academic article that I was reading that found that when speed cameras are doing ticketing of motor vehicles, the proportion of tickets issued to Black and white drivers aligns closely with their respective share of roadway users. So with human enforcement, in contrast, police officers stop Black drivers at a rate that far outstrips their presence on the road. So making sure that we're using technology as much as possible, while also working to increase the training of our local police.
Thank you, Nat. Dan, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think you start off with just how powerful that statistic was. 17% up for African American, Black, and 4% down for white. So I'm a big believer in always having data at every meeting, and so that would be there. And we would look at the fact that the disparities increased. We would make sure at that committee that they had all the access to information. Body-worn cameras are now part of our toolbox. So bring in some of the body-worn camera evidence that looks at some of those citations and study it. I think that Chief Day would be open to knowing he has a lot of humility every time I talk to him about disparities such as this. And so make sure it's just out there, it's clear, it's crisp. And we are talking about, therefore, what practices can we implement to make that disparity go down? And then track the data, look at what practices actually have impact, which ones don't. So when you're doing continuous improvement work, you start with data, you implement practices, you figure out which way the needle moves, and obviously want the needle to move towards justice and fairness. And so I'm just a big believer in making sure that honesty is always at the table, which is about raw, clear, crisp data. And I'm really glad that you brought this to our attention tonight. That's a very broad disparity, and it can't stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Mariah, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we hear continually, especially in North Precinct here, not far from the Urban League and in our district, is the understaffing that happens even when there are enough positions. And one of the things I want to do on council is to ensure that we have the staffing, the training, and the equipment that we need. And that includes cameras, including body cameras, that give the transparency that our communities and that the Police Accountability Board will need to evaluate how our police are interacting with our communities. I've been involved in the Albina Killingsworth Safe Neighborhoods Coalition, which was community-based policing, award-winning community-based policing, involved ministers, involved businesses, involved our community college. That's how I was involved, and involved North Precinct officers that were known in the community and helped reduce violence there. And I think that kind of local knowledge, the recruitment of officers from our community, is a part of reducing those disparities, having people that look like the communities they serve. That's not going to be a short-term solution, but it is, again, as Dan mentioned, focusing on the data and focusing on the process improvement and focusing on the outcomes that we're getting so that people aren't taking shortcuts by using race as a shortcut for something else. As a chair of Portland's Transportation Bureau Budget Committee, I helped prioritize putting 22 parking officers back on the street. So I do think having the enforcement there for the little things is going to be important to having the overall enforcement that we need and doing it in a fair way so that Black folks are not unfairly targeted, and giving that data that we need to demonstrate those metrics, because we do want a city that is fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. Tiffany, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, so I'm experienced enough to know that there are cultural and systemic issues around policing that we must address. But I also know that all the data points to that people want policing. What they want is safe, accountable policing. And so with the board, that is where the board is ultimately trying to get at, is safe and accountable policing for all of us. I am a firm believer that we should have everybody at the table. I think the police union president and Chief Day, I think they should be at the table with this committee and working out that where they have the rub. I believe that in order to solve problems, you have to bring people to the table and not alienate folks, because it takes all of us. We definitely, I believe in a good public safety. That's good 911, police and fire, well-trained, accountable, and well-resourced. I also believe in police being very involved in community, right, and building relationships. And with that, by that alone changes how we are viewed. So it is my hope that together we can all work together and come up with what accountability looks like, how we implement it, and just how we move forward in creating a safety for all of us.
Thank you, Tiffany. Mike, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks again, Michael. So I think it's important for us to look at who our police officers are. 70% of the Portland police live outside of Portland. And as a consequence, and I'm sure some of it's for affordability reasons, but I think it's also for cultural reasons and values reasons. And so I think we absolutely need to hire more police officers. I believe we need another 200 to get to what the national median is on police to population ratios. But we really need to look at hiring police officers that live in Portland, that are from Portland. If we want true community policing, we need police officers from the community. And I think that will address the culture. The second thing then is, clearly this is just, factually speaking, this is a racist statistic. And so I would like to hear from the police officers and the police union, not in a gotcha way, but folks, how is this happening? Why do you think it's happening? And more importantly, what do you think the solution is? Because this is not a reflection of who Portland is. And then lastly, the good thing about our new system is system of government is we're going to have the ability to do much more in-depth legislative oversight. And so we can be monitoring not just the statistics themselves and hoping for them to go down, but for the working with whether it's the police union or any other union in the city, working with them to get the outcomes that we all aspire to. And I believe they do too. But that level of accountability needs to be put into place. And I think that our new system of government is really providing us that opportunity.
Thank you, Mike. Ilana, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Michael. So first of all, I want to acknowledge how completely unacceptable the status quo is. And we're here because of a number of layers of, frankly, racism embedded into the system in terms of where patrols are, what assumptions folks make about behavior. And we need to start to undo that. We should set the expectation that Portland's Police Bureau be on the front end of undoing racism within the structure of policing. And setting that expectation doesn't mean we're saying anybody's specifically in trouble or that we're creating mad upheaval, but just that we have a goal that we're working toward, and we will hold people to making progress toward that goal. I think we need to make sure that we have high quality training for all of our police officers on how to recognize and undo their own biases. Everybody comes to the table with various biases in different parts of their life. And And we need to acknowledge that and acknowledge that there is work to do to undo that. When you're in a position of power, especially a position of power where you can have a huge effect on somebody's life and their ability to live, you have a greater responsibility to take on that work of undoing your own biases. I also think it's important specifically around what we can do with the board to make sure that they have the tools they need. So whether that is budget, whether that is specific policy authority, as the new legislative body in the city, I want to make sure that we have our own level of accountability, that our committees are calling in our police bureau to have regular check-ins about making progress toward undoing these statistics, and that we also are using our power of budgeting to make sure that the board is empowered and successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilana. Sam, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, the question, how will you work with the board to ensure disparities in policing Portland are monitored, corrected, and prevented? I'll draw on my experience in public safety and law enforcement for the last 30 years, but more importantly, my experience in education as a human rights commissioner when I was the chair of the Community Police Relations Committee, and our focus was on stops data way back then in 2013 and 2015. So I have a lot of experience and knowledge in this area, and quite frankly, it's disturbing that we are still talking about this and that the trend is getting even worse. One of the things I did personally with the No Hate Zone in 2016 was to bring together, specifically focus on bringing communities of color and police together to sit down and have dinner and build relationships and get to understand each other and value each other. Policies are important and the necessary accountability is important, but I will work to bring the board and the police and the leadership together and set a goal to get this statistic down once and for all, but also to build relationships and trust between the Black community and the police. You know, you can have policies, but we also have to show police officers the value of their job and how it can help them to do their job better and to build relationships and to feel comfortable in the community, but also for the community members to feel comfortable and have that trust with them as well. And I don't know that we're there yet. So I think it's about building trust. Policies are important, but we have to work together to move forward. And this will be one of my priorities. We have got to get this number down because Black people cannot feel safe and cannot trust police when they're being stopped and pulled over 17% more than their white counterparts. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I will work to bring people together, form those relationships, and get this number down. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. All right, this will be our last question. And again, please pay attention to the question and we'll go through a random order. The number of households experiencing homelessness in Portland has increased significantly since the pandemic. Black residents in particular are roughly 400% overrepresented in our homeless population. What is your plan to increase access to culturally specific resources and housing for Black Portlanders? And how will you work to prevent them from experiencing homelessness moving forward? Mike, we'll begin with you, and you have 2 minutes.
Great, Michael, thank you. And my colleagues are not going to be surprised. I'm going to lead with talking about the need to fix our addiction crisis here in the city. Oregon has the second highest addiction rate, ranks last in access to treatment, and we don't have the infrastructure we need. We need 4 sobering centers. We need to triple detox capacity. We need 1,000 recovery beds. And if we can do, addiction is just such an underlying issue with so many of the city's problems, including homelessness. However, they're not the same thing. There are plenty of folks who are not addicted to substances who are forced into being homeless because of a lack of resources, or rents go up, or their car needs to get fixed and they can't pay their rent, whatever the case may be. As someone who went through treatment, however, for addiction, and as a gay man, I know how important, when you are looking to heal, when you are looking to get out of a bad situation, how important culturally specific support is, to be with your community, to have engage with community members who are helping you move forward is hugely important. And so we know from the Joint Office that we need 3,000 homeless shelters. Thanks to Dan Ryan, we're going to end the year, I think, at 1,000 new ones, but we need 2,000 more. And I don't really understand why the Joint Office didn't come up with a plan to get 3,000. But we should be very focused on making sure that those are set aside, that there are elements or parts of those 2,000 shelters are set aside to be culturally specific communities. Just like we need sober communities, we need queer communities, we need Latino communities. I think we will be much better served by creating an environment in which people feel helped and heal and feel like they're healing, surrounded by their own community.
Thank you, Mike. Mariah, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Yes, there's really two pieces to this. There's the helping people off the streets and into shelters, and then there's the prevention piece. I'll say as the chair of the Northeast Coalition of Neighborhoods, which, as you know, was founded 50 years ago by African-American neighbors, primarily in the King neighborhood, to have a voice with the city. We helped people from tents into shelter and helped stand up the shelter at the corner of MLK and Killingsworth. That is a successful low barrier shelter, and it is about working with neighbors and the neighborhood to make places like that successful and to have the resources that are available. But having something like that, I will say, I see in our ERs where the piece of a shelter falls apart because there's not the next step. Whether, it's a culturally specific step that fits with people, it's a tiny house, it's a sobering center, what we need. So we need those pieces put together, certainly. But I'm really more concerned with the upstream, having the jobs that we need, places like POIC, like Constructing Hope, like the Oregon Tradeswomen, that are creating the jobs that keep people from being just simply paycheck to paycheck. And I know what that feels like. To having a job where you have financial stability and a future so that you can be a homeowner, so that you can have a stability long-term to buy a home, or just simply to be to have a future for your family and to be stable in your community. Those are the things that we really need to keep people out of homelessness long-term. So I'm going to look at investing in the models that are working. POIC is one that we should absolutely double down on. And it's about reaching out to stakeholders. I'll just say at OHSU during the pandemic, when we wanted to reach into Black communities and help get people vaccinated that we knew were hard to reach by asking them to come up to a big hospital on a hill.
Thank you, Mariah. We've timed out. All right. Sam, the mic is yours, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So the question, what is your plan to increase access to culturally specific resources? Currently, I don't have a plan, but this kind of goes in line with my narrative and what I've been talking about tonight. I think it has to do with intentionality. We have to look at this situation, not just with 400% of overrepresented Black people overrepresented in homelessness, but the gun homicide rate, the traffic stops. Being Black in Portland is not a great experience for many Black Portlanders, and we need to change that narrative. We need to change that outcome, and we need to be intentional about it. So my goal is to work with the organizations like Urban League, NAACP, many of the organizations involved in this and the community, and to see how can I be a resource? What is needed to change the narrative and the outcome and the livability for Black people in the city of Portland? And again, I've mentioned reparations. I think it's something we need to look at. We need to be intentional about how are we addressing the needs of the Black community? Why are people homeless? Who's homeless now? Tracking people and communicating with people to see what their needs are and what the resources are that we can provide to get them off the street and into housing, and to prevent them from going into the homeless situation. But I don't think that the city has really made it a priority when it comes to communities of color. And I don't think it's something that we can continue to ignore. So that will be my focus, is to be intentional in working with all the stakeholders to resolve this issue. And I think reparations is something we have to look at and be intentional about, making sure that Black people feel safe in our community and they have a place to live, and that they have returned back to the places that they.
Sam, thank you. Tiffany, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you for this question. So as an elected board member, I know how to Portland Community College, I know how important access to education opportunities are. This contributes to people's ability to make a living, to be able to afford to live in this city. I also have a program where I fund organizations, culturally specific organizations, through like POIC, SEI, supporting Urban League and things like that, people who provide wraparound services and supports to Black families, things that can help them stay in their homes, things that can also help them with just their bills, just struggling as just the working class. It is easier for us to keep people in their homes, and that instead of letting them get out on the street and then trying to capture them. Then the city already has the infrastructure set up to invest in culturally specific organizations that serve communities. I think where we should be more intentional about is really seeing what the need is and funding them appropriately. Like for instance, Urban League, they help with things that you need to stay in your home, but the need is so great that the money runs out quickly. So we need a real assessment of the need so we can fund these organizations appropriately so they can serve more folks.
Thank you, Tiffany. Ilana, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So when I worked in the governor's office, I had the privilege of helping to pass the state's first racial justice agenda, which was a community-driven agenda. And it was frankly shocking to me how hard it was for our elected leaders to take a step back and accept those policies as community-driven policies without feeling like they needed to tinker with them. And so the first thing that I think is really important when we talk about culturally specific resources is culturally specific solutions, and acknowledging that our next city council will need to at times take a step back and really hear from community what's needed without having to tinker with those solutions that were given. And I think that's an important piece of our job as leaders, is to know when to bring things together and when to step back and let community really truly lead. We have a lot of resources going for us. Tiffany talked about the partnerships that already exist with fantastic organizations across the city. And we now have, at times when we need a more specialized workforce, an opportunity in the University of Oregon campus here in Northeast Portland, training folks in a variety of types of social work and behavioral health supports. And we need to work with our community partners to make sure that we have the programs in place to help people go through those training programs when that's necessary as well, to make sure that we have the right workforce that's culturally appropriate. Finally, I think prevention is the most important piece of the puzzle here. How are we stopping folks from becoming homeless, both through good jobs? Affordability is a critical part of my platform, and also through just-in-time support so that you don't have to go through the eviction process to get help staying in your home. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this really important issue.
Thank you, Ilana. Dan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. When I pause and think about anything around homelessness, I always want to think of the short term and then the long term. I also like to decouple at least two different types. I use the word homelessness as people that are suffering from multiple issues, behavioral health and mental health, and their head and their heart are not connected, and it's very difficult, and we've been completely dishonest and denial. Then there's affordability and there's poverty, and I think that those solutions are not easy, but they're more attainable if in fact we're partnered with the right communities. So Urban League, the ones mentioned earlier, the churches are connected to those families. And so I think that I'd like to dive into this data more deeply, but I do think that the Black population is bundled up in more couch surfing homes. I think that the drug crisis on our streets that we see is not as disproportional. That's just my eye test, perhaps. My point is we need to tackle the short term, and that's why we have to have partners like Urban League that know the community and can make sure, especially those with kids, are priorities and they stay in their school districts, they get to school on time. That type of stability is so important. And to me, it's all about economic justice. And what I love about the Urban League, when I think about the Urban League, I always think of them as being the #1 go-to partner to have this type of dialogue. So I haven't heard enough engagement with the communities that can give us the most wisdom on this issue. One size does not fit all is my point. And I think that's what we're hearing from all of us in different threads. So we need to have different strategies for different communities. And I look forward to always being an ally in that regard. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Nat, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So, like Commissioner Ryan just said, that there's two kind of aspects. One is people who are living on the streets, and the other one is people who have housing insecurity. And hopefully we have a one-way path on that. People who are moving from homelessness into housing. But we don't want to obviously see it go the other way. But they are two different issues that we should pay attention to. So starting with homelessness, when I was a TriMet bus driver, I picked up a lot of people who were experiencing homelessness. A lot of those people had HOP cards and that were clearly supplied by service providers. So I saw firsthand that statistic that Black folks are 400% overrepresented in homeless population. So specifically to address homelessness, in Black Portlanders, obviously Commissioner Ryan just mentioned it, working with folks like Urban League, fantastic knowledge base there, Hacienda, CDC, SEI, Habitat for Humanity, NEA, to work with those groups to create the best policies to create more shelter in D2. Again, talking about Commissioner Ryan's work on the Safe Rest Villages, they were a great success. And they really show what happens when elected officials sort of get out of their lane and do something that they haven't done before to make immediate improvements. Safe Rest Villages, those tiny homes are the best dollar spend that we have to move people into permanent housing. It's something like 45% of people who enter them move on to permanent housing for something like under 10% of congregate shelters. We need shelters of all kinds. But Safe Rest Villages, tiny homes are a great spend of our money. Beyond shelter, I'll work to create more housing in District 2, which will lower the overall cost of housing. Specifically, District 2 has the most number of Black residents of any other district, slightly beating out District 1. More housing keeps more people in housing, and then having deeply affordable housing is really important to keep people in that permanent housing.
Nat, thank you very much. Chris, you have 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this question. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but first thing I'm going to start with is the policy that's been on my agenda since day one, which is stopping the sweeps. The sweeps keep people unhoused. It's an absolute inhumane treatment of individuals. I personally just witnessed a sweep of disabled, homeless, queer youth, some of them a part of the BIPOC community. And it was the most abysmal thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. They were in wheelchairs, and most of they were not physically, they were mentally disabled and had no ability to move themselves with a 3-day notice to get to anywhere, especially because where they're staying was right across from services that they needed on a daily basis. So the first thing we need to do is stop these sweeps so that we can use the money, which we spent over $22 million in the last 4 years over that on sweeps in the city, and use that to open up services that are culturally specific for people of color and for people of all types of communities. So I will work extremely hard to stop these sweeps because we're essentially telling people to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and then stealing the bootstraps right out from underneath them, which is totally unacceptable. Other than that, I will plan on passing my renter's bill of rights. I'm sorry, my dog has decided to bark the entire time. I don't know if you can hear him, but pass my renter's bill of rights to make sure that people stay in homes that are affordable and we keep them from becoming homeless.
Chris, thank you very much. All right, we will now move on to our closing statements from the candidates, and these will be delivered in reverse alphabetical order. So we will begin with Nat West, and each candidate will have 1 minute for their closing statement. Nat, we will begin with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us all. Just last night, I finished reading a book called A Peculiar Paradise about the history of Blacks in Oregon. My friend Troy Winslow loaned it to me. And I came away with a greater understanding of the history of this state, but more importantly, I was reminded yet again of the resilience of Oregon's Black community. I see that resilience not just in historical terms, but even today in development projects across District 2, such as Albina 1, Williams and Russell, and well, for that matter, everything that Audrey development touches. And it is that resilience and hard work that I look forward to bringing to council and elevating on council. I don't have all the answers, but I'm here to listen and to work. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you very, very much. Sam, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks for this opportunity. I'll be brief. My record speaks for itself. I've shared with you tonight. If elected, I'm going to be very intentional in my approach in the 1,461 days I have to serve Portlanders and North and Northeast Portlanders, and my priority will be to make life in the city of Portland for Black Portlanders and the BIPOC community better than what it is today, addressing traffic fatalities, housing Black renters, police stops, homelessness, gun violence. That will be my priority in my 4 years and 1,461 days. We will make Portland a better place for Black Portlanders, and we will fulfill the promises. And that's what I'm running for, and that's what I intend to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sam. Dan, you can offer your closing statement.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Michael Alexander, for being the facilitator. I'm running because I'm born and raised in this part of town, graduated from Roosevelt High School. My mom, after raising 8 children, went to University of Portland. My dad had a small business in St. John's. I just have a lot of relationships, whether you like me or not. I know a lot of people because I've been hanging out in these parts for a while. And what I keep hearing from everybody, no matter what their ideology is, no matter what their race is they're angry that it's more expensive to live here and the services have gone down, and they've gone down badly in the last 10 years. And so when I talk to Black residents, they're just telling me, could someone answer the phone when I call 911? When I call 911, it's not just a little casual phone call. I want someone to pick it up, and I expect the police to be there ASAP. So I think we're all running because we know we got to keep turning the ship in the right direction for our families that live in Portland. And that's what I'm going to do for my hometown on this next city council. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Ilana, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, Michael, for hosting tonight. Thank you to Open Signal and to the Urban League for providing this opportunity. I really appreciate being included in the conversation. I am a mom. I'm a convener. I am an advocate and a policy expert who can work with community, bring people together to get the job done for Portland. I will look at every policy that comes before me through the lens of whether or not it makes our community and our economy more equitable, more sustainable, and more resilient. Because if we're not moving in that direction, we are not creating a Portland that works for everybody, and we are not investing in our future. We need to be focused on the future of our city right now, not just our challenges today, but where we're headed. I will work with everybody because for our city to work for everyone, we need solutions that include all voices. And for that reason, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you after the election, but I also want to hear from you now. If you have concerns, questions, please reach out. I hope to earn all of your support.
Ilana, thank you very much. All right, Tiffany, you have 1 minute.
Hi, thank you, and thank you for having us. Again, I'm born, raised, and rooted in this community. I have been doing the work. I have been working with organizations. I've been working to make a difference for children and families. As elected PCC board member, I have created policy and approved policy. I believe in this city. I believe in all that it has to offer. I envision a Portland where people and businesses are thriving, supported by transparency, city policies, practices, and creating opportunities for all Portlanders. I'm running to represent District 2 on the Portland City Council because I am passionate about my city and making sure that I am committed to making Portland work again. The bottom line is that our city has to deliver the services that keep our communities clean, safe, and functioning. And I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Chris, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Yes, thanks, Michael. And I want to say thanks to the Urban League of Portland for having me attend this forum. I really appreciate it. To keep things short, the reason I'm running and one of the main reasons was that this role changed with the charter reform, that it was going to be a representative role. And that's what made me really excited about it, is because I've always been on the ground working with everyday people, understanding their backgrounds, where they're coming from, just like I just showed up to this sweep of these unhoused disabled queer youth to understand where they're coming from and what meet their needs. I want to do that for as many people as I can in the city of Portland if I'm elected to Portland City Council. It's time that we have a government that actually cares and listens and understands where people are coming from and puts policies in place that will actually make a real difference. And that's what I'm here to do. So check me out at olsonforpdx.com.
Right. Thank you, Chris. Mike, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Great. Thank you, Michael, and thanks to the Urban League for having us. Truly a great conversation tonight. Come January 29th, I'll have 17 years of sobriety, God willing. And I know what it takes to get people who are addicted and on the streets, off the streets, and into a healing place. And so I think my lived experience, but also my policy background of starting and running Oregon Recover 7 years ago, makes me the right candidate at the right moment here in Portland. But my husband and I moved here 12, 13 years ago as part of our recovery because we love Portland. We love that it's quirky. We love that it's was the city that works. We love that it thinks big ideas like reinventing our democracy. And so I hope you'll go to my website, mikemarshallforportland.com, and I would truly appreciate everyone's vote.
Thank you, Mike. Mariah, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
I just want to say thank you so much to the Urban League. And I know you all have a lot to consider here with many talented candidates, but I just want to close by saying, whether as a leader at OHSU helping to get vaccines to our communities, to churches to make them accessible to our Black community, or as the chair of NECN, working to support our small businesses and support our African American communities around safety and other things. It's about how your leaders help operationalize those solutions and operationalize our compassion. I'm a leader who will help make that real in our communities, and I would like to ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah, and thanks to all of you. As tonight's forum ends, I want to thank our partners at LMS Captioning and Open Signal who are airing this forum. We want to thank our candidates who are with us tonight running for Council District 2. And we want to thank our community partners. I also want to highlight the importance of voting. The deadline for the registering to vote for the election is October 15th, and the election is November the 5th. Democracy only works when people vote. So please get registered if you aren't and vote. At the Urban League of Portland, much of our work is done with local partners who embrace our deep commitment to shared values. We would like to thank the following partners who have helped support us in this work: Reimagine Oregon, the NAACP of Portland, Fair Housing Council, SEIU 49, Welcome Home, the Coalition of Black Men, Kairos PDX, the Muslim Education Trust, the Women's Foundation, YWCA, Impact Northwest, the Children's Institute, NEA, Latino Network, Northwest Pilot Project, and Self Enhancement, Inc. In closing, please remember that the Urban League is a nonprofit organization that relies on donations and memberships to allow us to serve our community. It's through your generosity that the Urban League can host forums and other events like this. Tonight's event was part of the Urban League series of virtual candidate forums for the general election. Please visit ulpdx.org to learn more about our series of events. If you need assistance voting or registering during the election, staff at the Urban League are ready to talk with you. Please reach out to them on their website, social media, or call them directly at 503-280-2600 for assistance. And now, on behalf of my friend and colleague, Urban League President and Chief Executive Officer, Nakenge Harmon Johnson, the Board of Directors, and the staff and all of our members, I thank our audience for joining us tonight. I am Michael Alexander, past President and Chief Executive Officer of the Urban League of Portland, and it is my privilege to bid you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.